She looked at me in front of 100 guests and said, "Sit by the trash where you fit." That's when I realized I wasn't part of this family. I was a utility. The ballroom reeked of artificial charm floral centerpieces flown in from Europe champagne that bubbled more from ego than fermentation and applause, as hollow as the causes this gala pretended to support. I stepped inside just past 7:15 late by design. Years of military discipline had trained me to be punctual, but tonight I wanted to arrive last. I didn't want to give anyone the chance to act like they were waiting for me. The place glittered drenched in curated elegance, but it all felt cold. Hilton Charlotte's chandeliers cast a yellow glaze over gowns too tight and smiles too wide. I adjusted my dress uniform sharp as ever and caught my reflection in a silvered column, jaw-clenched eyes scanning. A soldier surrounded by silk and sequins. I've survived ambushes and landmines, but nothing pierced like her voice that night. A waiter floated by with a tray of stuffed figs. I declined. Hunger wasn't the ache gnawing at me. Sierra spotted me as I moved closer to the crowd. She wore a deep red dress that screamed, "Look at me," and a grin that practiced itself in mirrors. "Everyone," she called, lifting a crystal flute. "Let's take a moment to thank the one person who always believed in me. My sister Colonel Colleen Reyes, serving this country and somehow always finding time to support me emotionally." Laughter rippled. Eyes turned to me. I gave a tight smile, nodded slightly. Emotionally, that wasn't what my direct deposits were called. The MC moved on. Sierra glided through conversations like a queen inspecting her court. She didn't make room for me at her table. I stood for several minutes unnoticed beside a cluster of donors discussing crypto and yachts. I scanned the room round tables with name cards, carefully curated seating charts. My name wasn't on any. I approached the family table. Sierra, our mother, and a few socialites I vaguely remembered from high school fundraisers were mid-meal. "There's no seat here," Sierra said without looking up, her voice sweetened with faux surprise. "You're fine there, sis. Sit by the trash where you fit." She gestured behind her. A decorative bin beside a utility shelf, the space where waiters lean to catch their breath. Someone stifled a chuckle. Another offered a sympathetic glance that vanished before it could land. Our mother stared at her napkin, her expression unreadable. Angela, seated 2 chairs away, froze. Her fork paused halfway to her mouth, and her eyes found mine. No pity. Just awareness. I nodded once. Without saying a word, I turned. My heels echoed lightly as I crossed the ballroom floor. I passed rows of champagne glasses, smiling faces, clinking forks. No one stopped me. No one noticed. Except Angela. Outside, the night was sharp and clean. I stood by the valet podium for a moment, letting the wind remind me that I still felt something. That the part of me Sierra hadn't drained dry still pulsed. War taught me patience. Betrayal taught me silence. But this would teach her consequences. They never asked if I was okay. They asked for money every time. Sunday morning, sunlight spilled through the window in clinical lines. My apartment smelled like brewed coffee and order, military tidy, everything where it belonged. No clutter, no color beyond beige and steel. The kind of space where chaos had to knock before entering. I sat at my small kitchen table, a laptop open, cursor blinking on an old banking portal I hadn't visited in years. I shouldn't have logged in, but I couldn't stop myself. This wasn't nostalgia. This was forensic accounting. Line after line, transaction after transaction. 15 years of transfers. I clicked through each one, amounts between $300 and $3,000 tagged Sierra R. or SRF or family emergency. The memo lines read like a diary of manipulation. March 2009, surgery prep urgent, love you. June 2011, bridal deposit, I promise it's the last one. August 2015, car broke down, can't get to work. February 2017, mom collapsed, No insurance. It didn't matter where I was. Germany, Korea, Afghanistan. I'd be kneeling in sand gunfire in the distance and my phone would vibrate. Not with news of home or a simple, "Are you alive?" but with PayPal requests and crying voice memos. Colleen Sierra would sob into my voicemail. "I hate asking you for help again, but you're the only one who understands. I'd be so lost without you." And I believed her. God help me, I believed her. Until now. Angela knocked softly and let herself in. She moved with the same deliberate grace she always had, like she didn't want to leave fingerprints on the air. She held 2 coffees and raised a brow when she saw my laptop. "You digging through tax records or exorcising demons?" she asked, handing me the stronger brew. "Both," I muttered, gesturing at the screen. 15 years. That's how long I've been her financial spine. Angela pulled out a chair, her expression sharpening as she scanned the numbers. "Is that 15 grand?" I shook my head. "Closer to 70. Maybe more if I count the times I covered for Mom." Angela went still. I let her do this. I added more to myself than her. I let her cry and plead, and I was always deployed, always too far away to see the full picture. She called it sisterhood. Angela's eyes didn't blink. That's not sisterhood. That's theft wrapped in guilt. I laughed, but it tasted bitter, and I swallowed it whole. She leaned back, scanning my face. What happened at the gala wasn't just cruel. It was surgical. She knew exactly where to cut. I nodded, then turned the screen toward her again. Here's the best part. I opened a folder labeled Inspiration Files, something I'd stumbled upon months ago when Sierra forgot to log out of her shared drive during a family Zoom. I hadn't thought much of it back then. Now I dug deeper. There it was. A PDF Women in Valor Grant proposal. The opening paragraph hit like a slap. "Growing up in the shadow of military excellence, I have drawn strength from my sister's uniform. Her sacrifice, her silence, and her awards inspired me to serve in other ways through fashion philanthropy and empowerment." I scrolled faster, photos of my deployments, medals I earned, even a shot of me dragging a wounded comrade under fire. She'd used them all to sell herself as a vessel of resilience, as if my war scars were her marketing kit. Angela stood up. "She didn't just take your money," she said, voice low. "She stole your story." I closed the laptop slowly, each movement deliberate, measured. My pulse felt calm, too calm. I was back in a familiar zone, that dangerous clarity before an operation begins. Angela leaned closer. "If you're done being their ATM, let's start making them pay with truth." That smile wasn't hers. It was mine. She'd copied it off my military ID photo. The espresso tasted burnt, but I kept sipping. The bitterness kept my mind alert, sharper than caffeine alone ever could. Outside the window, the morning traffic crawled past, unaware that everything inside me had shifted since the gala. Angela sat across from me, scrolling through her phone, her brows occasionally twitching with interest or disgust. Her silence was comforting, like the pause before a well-aimed shot. "I want to show you something," she said after a moment. "There's a bookstore event around the corner. Local spotlight thing. Guess who's on display?" I didn't need to guess. I'd learned long ago that when Angela said guess, it was never good. We walked the few blocks to Wellington Books, a cozy indie shop with polished wood floors and curated scent diffusers, trying too hard to smell like cinnamon and revolution. A table near the entrance was covered in pamphlets, branded pens, and a large trifold display. Front and center, Sierra Reyes Foundation, empowering the future one girl at a time. And there it was. The poster showed Sierra in soft lighting, her hair curled just enough to look effortless in front of a digital montage of war zones, schoolgirls, and folded flags. She smiled, a precise, restrained smile, the exact expression I had used on my military ID, the one I practiced to look composed, but not cold. She'd copied it. "That's my goddamn face," I said, voice flat. Angela didn't respond. She was already pulling out her phone. A young girl in a denim jacket hovered nearby, clutching a flyer. She turned to her friend and whispered, "She rescued girls from a conflict zone in Sudan, right? Or was it Syria?" Another chimed in, "No, it was Afghanistan." I watched the video. She was embedded with a unit for like 2 months. My stomach tightened. "Let's see what this QR code does," Angela muttered, scanning it. The page loaded instantly. A promotional video started to play. String-swelled female vocals whispered hope, and then there I was. Not Sierra. Me. A grainy clip of my third deployment carrying 2 children across a damaged bridge, while gunfire crackled somewhere distant. I hadn't even known that footage existed in the public domain. It faded into Sierra's voice, narrating, "I've been where they've been. In the dust, in the silence, after violence. I made it out, and now I give them the strength to rise." I stared at the screen, unmoving. The timeline didn't make sense. She wasn't even in country. She was in Miami, launching a swimwear line. Angela looked up from her phone. She didn't even try to be subtle. Young women continued drifting past the table, some signing up for newsletters, others snapping selfies with the poster. One of them looked at me with admiration, mistaking the resemblance for fandom. I turned away. We wandered deeper into the store, but I couldn't focus on the shelves or titles. Angela followed silently until we reached a quiet aisle near the philosophy section. I took a sharp breath and doubled back. At the display, I reached for the poster. No one was looking. My fingers curled around the edge, and in one swift, clean motion, I peeled it off the foam board. No announcement, no outburst, just quiet reclamation. I folded the poster, slid it under my arm, and walked back toward Angela. She didn't ask. We exited the store, the bell above the door jingling as if nothing had happened. As we hit the sidewalk, Angela spoke. "She didn't just borrow your story. She trademarked it. You know what hurts more than a bullet? Realizing you're not missed, only replaced." The wreath on the front door still smelled fresh too, floral, too forced, like someone trying to cover rot with roses. I stood on the porch of the house I'd grown up in, boots, planted on the doormat that now read, "Welcome home," with a sunflower smiley. That smile never meant me. The funeral had been for Uncle Pete. Distant by blood, but close enough that his passing merited a full family gathering. The house buzzed with post-reception rituals, casserole dishes, murmured gossip laughter that didn't belong to grief. I wasn't here to mourn Pete. I was here to confirm what Angela suspected, that I'd been written out of the Reyes family narrative like an editing error. Inside, it smelled like candles and overcooked meat. Sierra's voice echoed from the dining room, warm, magnetic, a polished performance. I hung back in the hallway, scanning the family photos lining the walls. None of them were of me. The staircase once decorated with snapshots from my graduation at West Point, my commissioning ceremony, even a blurry one of me hugging Dad after Basic now displayed glossy prints of Sierra at a fundraiser, Sierra on a talk show, Sierra holding a rescued puppy with a girl power sash. I stepped into the living room and froze. The mantel above the fireplace used to hold a shadow box with my medal from Operation Northern Watch. The box was gone. In its place stood a framed headshot of Sierra, softened with filters and framed with lilies. I turned slowly. Our mother stood near the window holding a glass of white wine she wasn't drinking. She noticed me staring. "That photo," she said, as if reading my mind. "Well, she's here more often. Easier to keep things current." "Right," I said, the word heavier than lead. Sierra entered the room like she owned it. "Colleen, come take a photo with us." I didn't move. She didn't wait. A few relatives huddled around her. Phones came out. Smiles locked into place. She struck a pose between our cousins' arms around them like wings. "Say sisterhood," she beamed. Aunt Margot leaned in to me, whispering, "I thought you were the soldier." I gave her a sideways glance. then walked to the hallway. The photos didn't lie. Somewhere along the way, I'd become a ghost. One they were all too happy to pretend never haunted these halls. I found myself wandering upstairs. The second floor hadn't changed, the same creaky spot near the linen closet, the same scuff mark on the banister. I paused at the door to my old bedroom. It was open. Inside, the space had become a storage room, boxes, wrapping paper, gym equipment. But the dresser was still there. I opened the bottom drawer, unsure why. There they were. Letters. Dozens of them. Still in envelopes, some yellowing at the edges. My handwriting addressed to Mom, to Sierra, to home, all unopened. I picked one up, postmarked 2012, from Kandahar. Dear Mom, I'm safe. I miss you. We lost someone today. I can't talk about it, but I needed to tell someone. I needed to tell you. Sealed, unread, forgotten. I sat on the floor, letters spilling over my lap. My throat closed up, but I didn't cry. Not here. Not now. Downstairs, laughter erupted. Sierra again, probably telling the story of how she organized the whole memorial on her own. I clutched one letter, holding it like evidence. They hadn't forgotten me. They'd erased me. I stood, placed the letters back into the drawer with surgical precision, and shut it. You buried me a long time ago. Now I'll return the favor, starting with the truth. This isn't revenge. It's retrieval. I'm taking back what's mine. The light in my apartment was dim by choice. Lamps, instead of overhead's corners left in shadow, controlled quiet. My laptop glowed in the center of the table like a target under spotlight. A dossier of Sierra's charity website, scanned grant files, and public financial disclosures lay open, arranged like tactical maps before deployment. Some people strike back in anger. I move in silence. I tapped through the IRS filings again. Reyes Women's Leadership Initiative, Inc., registered in North Carolina. Foundation formed in 2019. But what hit me was the acronym stamped on all official grant letters: RWLI, Colleen M. Reyes Honor Fund. My name, not Sierra's. No footnote, no asterisk. Just a quiet theft written into ink and applauded into existence. Angela leaned over my shoulder, her breath held like we were defusing a bomb. She's literally cashing in on your rank. I didn't answer. I clicked on a linked video labeled Annual Courage Gala Keynote 2022. It opened to Sierra on stage, sleek in black, speaking to a packed ballroom. She once walked through enemy fire with nothing but a radio and her spine, she was saying. That's the kind of spirit we bring to this mission. The screen behind her flashed with grainy footage, my footage, a briefing I'd given in 2015 to a NATO advisory group in Kabul. That clip was classified until 2020. I remembered every frame. I had worn that beige blouse once under body armor. Angela swore under her breath. She didn't even bother editing out your face. She didn't need to, I said. Nobody knows what I look like. I began building a timeline. Deployed to Kandahar in 2013, injured in 2014, stationed in Stuttgart 2015. Meanwhile, Sierra was attending wellness retreats in Sedona and founding empowerment workshops funded by grants tagged to military service. I pulled up her speaking schedule. A talk at Duke in 2019, a panel at SXSW in 2021, a Women in Valor luncheon in 2022. All of them used language I recognized from my own citations, even lines from letters I'd written. Steel isn't born in comfort, leaders emerge where systems fail. She'd plagiarized my pain into her brand. Angela opened her laptop and mirrored my pace, pulling archived interviews, timestamps, social media footage. I kept mapping. You're quiet, she said. I'm busy, I said. There's a difference. I opened an encrypted messenger and typed, need a favor. It's time to fight clean and win dirty. Sent to Frank, former JAG officer. Trusted. Dangerous when righteous. The ping came back within seconds. Tell me when and where. Angela handed me a manila envelope. This came in from the local records request you filed. Inside were scanned grant submissions. One stood out immediately. A power of attorney document dated March 2020, supposedly signed by me, giving Sierra limited financial rights to access my military benefits for joint foundation initiatives. The signature was close, but not mine. I had never seen this paper before. My spine stiffened. Angela caught the shift and leaned in. This goes beyond misrepresentation, I said. She was already flipping through the page. Then she looked up, face sharpened by disbelief. This is felony territory. We're not just going after her brand anymore. We're taking down her empire. The signature wasn't mine, but the betrayal that was screaming in my own handwriting. Angela dimmed the overhead lights, leaving only her desk lamp glowing against the wall of monitors. The printer hummed quietly beside us, a new set of documents sliding onto the tray, yet another stack of stolen truths. I stared at the scanned power of attorney form again, already knowing what I'd see. It bore my name, Colleen M. Beckett, and a shaky imitation of my signature. Close enough to fool a funding committee, not close enough to survive scrutiny. She'd taken my name, my rank, now my pen. I leaned back, fingers steepled, trying to breathe through the rising heat in my chest. I warned her, I said aloud. Back in 2016. She asked me about tapping into the honor relief grant. I told her don't ever mess with what I've bled for. Angela rotated her monitor so I could see the zoomed-in scan. You see the loop on the B? Your real signature curves left. This one slants right, classic forgery. She didn't even bother to trace. I muttered. She didn't have to, Angela said. She knew no one would question it. You were the perfect ghost donor, heroic, invisible. The screen refreshed. Angela had logged into the public grant registry from the Department of Veterans Affairs. It took 3 password resets and 1 call to Frank, but she was in. And the records were damning. On the screen was a 2020 approval form for a $75,000 grant from the Valor Equity Fund reserved for veterans building community-based organizations. Recipient Reyes Women's Leadership Initiative, authorized by Colleen M. Beckett. Purpose trauma-informed mentorship for survivors of combat-related gender violence. My stomach turned. Not just because it used my name or because it twisted my deployments into buzzwords, but because she'd siphoned resources from women who needed that fund to survive. Women like the ones I'd sat with in Afghanistan bandaging wounds we didn't have morphine for. Women who'd gone home in boxes. Angela opened a folder of my old discharge paperwork and scanned one of my verified signatures into her comparison software. A second later, both versions appeared side by side. Confirmed, she said. Forgery. My phone buzzed on the desk. Frank. I answered with a clipped talk. You were right, he said. I pulled the 2021 roster from the Valor Warriors Summit in D.C. Sierra was listed as an honoree. Said she was the sister of a fallen veteran who inspired her journey. I'm not dead, I said flatly. She used that line to secure stage time. They even put your combat photo in the slide deck, blurred out your name tag, but it's you. I recognized the scar on your wrist. Angela snapped to attention. Wait. That was a closed event, wasn't it? Military-only audience? Yep. She wore a knockoff service dress and told the press afterward she was honored to represent Gold Star families. It's all on tape. Want me to send it? Send everything I said. And Frank, what's the statute of limitations on federal grant fraud? 5 years. But we don't need time. We need motive and proof. Sounds like you've got both. I ended the call. The room was silent again, except for the printer feeding out another copy of Sierra's betrayal. Angela picked up the most damning document, the forged authorization, and slipped it into a sleeve. Then, with the calm of someone handling radioactive waste, she said, We need to get this to someone who matters. I already know who I said attaching the files to a secure email and ceasing a contact I hadn't spoken to since Stuttgart legal counsel for the National Veterans Oversight Committee. I hovered over the send button for half a second, then clicked. A one-way missile. Angela set the folder down slowly like laying flowers on a grave. Her voice was low but firm. She didn't just fake your name, she used it to steal from wounded soldiers. If she won't confess to a mirror, maybe she'll confess to a microphone. The wine bar reeked of artificial oak and polished vanity. Soft jazz spilled from overhead speakers mixing with the low murmur of moneyed conversations and clinking glasses. A Tuesday evening dressed like Friday, exactly Sierra's style. Angela sat alone at a table near the back, dressed in muted neutrals with a touch of glam enough to be taken seriously, not enough to be remembered. Her hair was pinned back, her glasses slightly oversized. She looked like what she claimed to be a financial blogger covering nonprofit transparency and high-net-worth philanthropy. Sierra swept in 10 minutes late like clockwork. Burgundy dress, gold accessories, and that signature smirk that said the rules were suggestions for other people. I watched from a parked car across the street, eyes fixed on the live transcript Angela was streaming to me through a secure app. The microphone, no bigger than a lipstick tube, was tucked into the inner lining of Angela's handbag, pointed upward, catching every breath and sip. The first 5 minutes were shallow wine preferences, praise for the venue, an anecdote about a previous donor who'd cried during her speech. But then, the sponsor arrived, a silver-haired man named Russell from a defense tech firm with a guilt-fueled foundation arm. Angela introduced herself as a writer for Donor Ledger Weekly. He nodded politely, already charmed by Sierra's practiced vulnerability. Of course our mission means a lot to me, Sierra said, swirling her wine. Empowering young women, especially those affected by conflict zones. You mentioned you've seen war zones firsthand, Russell asked. Angela didn't blink. Sierra exhaled a wistful laugh. I've been around enough of it. My sister served. Frontlines. The trauma sticks to you, even if you weren't the one holding the gun. Angela raised an eyebrow. That's a powerful statement. And your foundation's budget, do you allocate most toward field programs? There was a pause. The kind of pause where truth and performance collided. Sierra leaned in voice a shade lower. Well, officially yes. But let's be honest, some of those funds keep things moving. Travel wardrobe appearance matters. If I show up looking broke, who trusts the brand? Angela nodded slowly, sipping her Pinot. So personal expenses get rolled in. Sierra laughed lightly. It's not theft if that's what you're asking. It's optimization. The transcript pinged in real time. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. Besides, Sierra continued, they think those war stories are mine. The donors, the press? Honestly, who cares anymore? Inspiration sells better than honesty. Angela didn't flinch. Do you ever worry about someone calling you out? Sierra tilted her head as if the idea itself amused her. Who, Colleen? She scoffed. She owes me that much. Everything she has, she buried. I'm just reclaiming it. That's not stealing. That's reclaiming. The word landed like a grenade. Angela smiled as if she hadn't just recorded Sierra admitting to public fraud and emotional piracy. The rest of the conversation melted into filler, some mutual compliments, the promise of follow-up emails. But the real transaction had already occurred. 20 minutes later, Angela texted me one word: done. Back at her apartment, we listened to the audio again in full. The tone, the laughter, the brazenness, it was damning. But more than that, it was freeing. Angela clipped the final segment of the file, labeled it Confession Primary, and attached it to an encrypted message. Then she sent me a simple text. Now we burn it all down. I used to give orders in war rooms. Now I was planning justice in a podcast studio. The independent veteran studio smelled faintly of burnt coffee and recycled air, but the energy in the room was electric. Angela adjusted the headphones over her ears, her voice already syncing with the mic levels as the producer counted down in hand gestures. From behind the glass, I watched the red light flick on. Live. Frank's words rang in my head. You never fire first, but when you do, make sure it's lethal in truth. Angela leaned into the mic, calm, composed. Tonight we're going to talk about something we don't often hear: what happens when a decorated veteran's identity is stolen. Not by strangers or hackers, but by someone they trusted. Someone who used their service as a ladder. The host nodded solemnly. You're saying this happened to someone you know? Yes. Angela replied, voice low but firm. A soldier I've admired for years. She served in Afghanistan, Korea, Germany. But while she was defending the flag overseas, someone back home was using her image, her medals, even her words to build a brand. They didn't say Sierra's name. Not yet. But the dots were easy to connect for anyone who'd seen Sierra's media appearances. Angela pulled no punches. She spoke of documents signed without consent, of stolen footage from war zones, of a woman praised for heroism she never lived. She mentioned a podcast guest from years ago, Sierra, who once claimed she'd counseled troops under fire, but public records showed no service, no deployment, not even a first aid certification. I watched the live chat flood with questions. Some defended Sierra, most didn't. 10 minutes and Frank's message pinged on my burner phone, sending the list. Attached was a PDF every military honor I'd received confirmed and cataloged through the Department of Defense. I skimmed down Bronze Star, NATO Service Ribbon, Combat Medical Badge, and beside each, a citation number Sierra had used on grant application speeches and sponsorship decks. Angela had the receipts. I had the war. We set up a mirror site under a neutral username linking public record screenshots and voice clips. The goal wasn't to scream fraud from the rooftops. It was to whisper it in 100,000 inboxes until it became unignorable. By nightfall, the podcast had cracked 250,000 downloads. Veterans started flooding Sierra's official event page asking for her service record. One noticed her Operation Whisper logo matched the insignia of a unit I'd once led. Another flagged a quote she'd used on her merch, a line I'd written in a private newsletter to my platoon. By morning, her online store quietly went offline. I sat alone in my apartment, coffee in one hand, burner phone in the other. My heart didn't race. It pulsed steady, deliberate, like before a night patrol. Then my personal phone rang. I stared at the screen. Sierra. I answered. Hello. Her voice sliced through the speaker like a razor wrapped in velvet. You think you're clever? You're not the only one who knows how to fight. The first bullet came not from an enemy, but from someone I once loved. I stared at the glowing screen. The headline was so sharp it almost bled: Colonel or Con, the questionable past of Colleen Beckett. Below it, a photo of me cropped harshly from a deployment ceremony was splashed across the top of an exposé on a fringe veterans blog that had just gone mainstream. Someone had fed it through enough hands to give it reach. Now it was on Twitter, Reddit, even Google News alerts. The article was cruelly clever. It questioned my deployment, suggested I'd exaggerated my role, and even implied I'd been sidelined for erratic behavior, a direct reference to PTSD. A quote from an anonymous former commander claimed I was volatile under pressure and may have forged connections between herself and classified missions for attention. I scrolled lower. There, it was subtle, but unmistakable, a single line saying family sources confirm that I'd struggled with boundaries between reality and memory. Sierra didn't just punch me in the face. She aimed for my spine. Angela called before I could even look up. We need to talk. Now. Frank joined us via speakerphone while I paced Angela's living room, the article still open on her tablet. Character assassination, Frank barked. Oldest trick in the book when they've got nothing real, but the problem is this kind of thing sticks. Especially with veterans. Especially with women vets. Angela set down her mug, her voice calmer. We traced the article's origin. The author's real name is Kevin Braith. He's ghostwritten for Sierra's press before. I stopped pacing. So she's behind this? Angela nodded slowly. More than that. He used metadata from a draft saved under an email connected to her foundation's media kit. She didn't just approve it, she wrote half of it. Frank cursed under his breath. They want you to crawl Colleen. They want the spotlight so hot you retreat. I didn't answer. I needed air. In the quiet of Angela's back porch, I lit a cigarette I hadn't touched in years. The wind bit, but it was honest. Not like the rehearsed pity in that article. Not like the silence from my mother or the smugness behind Sierra's smile. The past 2 decades had taken more from me than most people could imagine. I'd missed weddings, births, even the death of our father, all because I was serving. And this was the thank you card. That night, the Veterans Honor Council summoned me to a private Zoom hearing. I sat straight back, the camera framing me from chest up. They asked polite questions requesting updated DD-2114 citations, any proof of the awards I claimed. It was standard procedure, but the fact they were asking meant they'd read the article too. After the call ended, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I went to the mirror. I slipped off my shirt and looked at the scar running down my shoulder, deep and ragged from shrapnel that nearly took my arm in Kandahar. This body carries truth they can't fake, I whispered to no one. I didn't need their belief. I needed their fear. As I started gathering paperwork, original documents, files, deployment logs, Angela burst in with her phone in hand. "You need to see this," she said, her face pale. She turned the screen to me. An email chain from Kevin Braith. Threaded through it, replies from Sierra approving phrasing, correcting wording, even suggesting where to place my supposed mental health issues. Angela's voice dropped. She didn't just fake the narrative. She approved every word. When you want the truth to whisper, you hide it in plain sight. The storage room smelled like dust, sweat, and bureaucratic time. Row after row of metal filing cabinets stretched into cold, silence-forgotten corners of history that mattered deeply to the few who had lived them. Frank was already elbow-deep in one of the drawers when I arrived. He didn't look up. "I found it," he said. I took the manila envelope he held out. It was labeled plainly in government font, Operation Crescent Echo, Debrief File 7B. Inside was a DVD, a mission transcript, and a 2-page summary signed in pen by General Marcus Albright, then head of U.S. Special Forces, now a federal liaison for the Veterans Committee. I slid the disc into the archive room's monitor, and there I was. On grainy footage, body armor covered in dust, voice low but commanding. My team flanked behind me. The camera had caught everything: 14 civilians huddled inside a bombed-out textile warehouse, their eyes, wide limbs, trembling. And us, moving like muscle memory, extracting every last one of them, while sniper fire cracked in the distance. I hadn't seen this footage in over a decade. Angela arrived just as the screen faded to black. Frank briefed her quickly. This was buried under generic action reports. No one thought to digitize it. Bureaucracy hid it. But it's real. It's clean. It's lethal. Angela nodded, then handed me a flash drive. "This has the audio. We'll edit it clean. No theatrics, just truth. Let the silence between the bullets speak louder than any article." We left the Georgia archive that evening with the weight of something rare, facts that mattered. 2 days later, we sat in the VA Center conference room in Charlotte prepping for the press conference. I paced in slow circles. Frank worked the seating plan, Angela confirmed media invites, and a young man waited quietly near the coffee table. Colleen. Frank gestured toward him. "Meet Ethan." I turned. He looked maybe 30 now, but I saw it instantly. The boy from the warehouse, the one who wouldn't let go of my vest strap as we ran. Now a father, a school teacher, a man. "You remember?" he asked, voice thick. "Every face," I said. He smiled. "That mission changed everything. My whole family's alive because of you." I swallowed hard. Ethan reached into his coat and pulled out an old Polaroid, me crouching beside him, helmet offhand on his shoulder. My mom kept this, he said. She said, "One day you'll give that woman her story back." I guess that's today. Angela's voice broke the moment. Let's go over it one more time. We pulled up the schedule for the press conference set for December 15th. A precise media list, 4 vetted witnesses, and the core file burned onto 3 secure USBs. No frills, no grandstanding, just documents, mission footage, and first-person testimony. As Angela clicked through the presentation outline, she paused. This isn't about revenge anymore. It never was, I said. She turned to me, eyes level. You didn't just lead missions, you saved legacies. Now let's save yours. I looked out the window of the VA center where the winter light had begun to turn copper. Somewhere beyond those trees, Sierra was still dressing up in my stripes, holding microphones with hands that had never known recoil or rescue. But not for long. She stole my voice. Now I take it back in front of everyone. I wasn't stepping into a press conference. I was stepping into Battle One with lights, cameras, and every lie she ever told. The hotel ballroom smelled like nerves and corded microphones. Behind the velvet curtain, I adjusted the cuff of my blazer, military pin perfectly centered on the lapel. No ribbons, no uniform, just the posture of someone who had earned the right to stand here, and the burden that came with it. Angela peered out at the crowd through the curtain slit. Full house, she whispered. Reporters from 3 networks, veterans from 4 states, 2 congressmen's aides, and somewhere beyond the cameras a nation ready to watch either a takedown or a collapse. Frank handed me the USB one last time, locked clean, time-stamped. I nodded and stepped forward. The lights hit like search beams. I didn't flinch. I'm not here for applause, I said into the mic. I'm here because 20 years of service were hijacked and monetized. Someone used those years, my years, to build a brand of lies. The screen behind me came alive. December 2012. Kandahar Province. Operation Crescent Echo. The room fell silent as the footage rolled smoke, gunfire, a woman's voice barking orders, mine. The grainy video showed civilians sprinting to safety led by soldiers in perfect formation. No music. No edits, just fact. Angela cued the next slide, an application form, Veteran Funding Program 2020. The signature read, Colleen Beckett. Next to it, a side-by-side comparison, my official signature and Sierra's forgery. The crowd leaned in. Some phones were already capturing everything. I stepped back as Ethan approached the podium. I was 15 when that woman pulled me from a collapsed warehouse, he said, gesturing to me. She didn't ask for gratitude. She never told her story because it wasn't a brand. It was duty. He paused. Sierra Beckett. She wasn't there. She couldn't tell you where that battlefield even was. A few people gasped. Angela took the stage next, her voice steady. For those asking how deep this goes, we have audio. A private conversation in which Sierra Beckett confirms she used her sister's service record image and voice to secure donations and sponsorships. The audio played. They think the war stories are mine. Who cares? Colleen owes me that much. It's not stealing. It's reclaiming. The ballroom was frozen. No coughing, no note-taking, just the heavy silence of shame shifting its weight onto someone else's shoulders. Angela looked at me, then stepped back. I returned to the mic. I don't need pity, I said into the lens of the live stream camera. My voice didn't waver. I want accountability. She built an empire out of mirrors. Now the lights were on and every reflection cracked. December 16th began with a tweet. One of Sierra's top sponsors, the Roosevelt Foundation, posted a sterile but unmistakable statement. Effective immediately, all affiliations with the Beckett Women's Initiative have been suspended pending internal review. That tweet was retweeted 12,000 times in an hour. By noon, 2 more major donors pulled funding. Then the grant board from the Veterans Alliance issued a formal cease of disbursements to the foundation due to discrepancies in submitted documentation. Angela sat in her kitchen laptop open, watching it unfold like a storm cloud blooming in real time. She typed updates into a shared folder. The title of the document was Blunt Damage Control Impossible. Meanwhile, Sierra appeared at her organization's office for an emergency meeting. The building, modern glass and brushed steel, looked like success. But the people inside looked like collateral. Her PR head was gone before 10 a.m. Her finance director refused to enter the boardroom without legal counsel. By late afternoon, the internal audit team forwarded a cache of flagged documents to the Financial Ethics Committee. Several included metadata proving Sierra had altered grant applications, personally replacing names and modifying military achievements. She tried to blame it on an assistant, a rogue intern she called him, in a statement that sounded rehearsed and hollow. But then came the email chain. Forwarded by an anonymous employee, it showed Sierra giving explicit instructions to lean into the hero imagery and use Colleen's record, "She Won't Speak Up." The internet, of course, had receipts. The podcast clip of Angela recounting the stolen valor scandal had hit 2.3 million views. The press conference video passed 1 million overnight. Comment sections were lit with fury, disbelief, and screenshots. One tweet summed it up perfectly. She monetized her sister's trauma. That's not just fraud, it's emotional embezzlement. On December 18th, the Charlotte Observer published a Sunday cover story titled "The Sister Who Stayed Silent Until Now." It was clean cold and devastating. Photos from the press conference, snippets of Sierra's old speeches, side-by-side comparisons of uniforms, hers and Colleen's. Angela texted Colleen the article. No words, just a link. Colleen didn't reply. She was already reviewing the upcoming calendar. Because December 20th brought the real headline, Sierra Beckett had been formally summoned to appear before the North Carolina Office of Charitable Oversight. The charges were still under review, but the optics were unignorable. The headline was unkind, "From Hero to Hoax, Beckett Called to Testify." At her foundation's once busy office, lights were off, doors locked. Social media accounts either disabled or flooded with comments demanding answers. One former volunteer posted on Instagram, "She used to say, 'We fight for the invisible.' Turns out the real invisible person was her sister." Sierra didn't post, didn't appear, didn't apologize. But at 11:46 p.m., Colleen received a message from Frank. "They're digging up her entire past. You lit the match. Now let it burn." She tried to weaponize my silence, but now even silence has teeth. The summons arrived in a courier envelope, crisp as a threat dressed in legal jargon. Sierra Beckett versus Colleen Beckett, filed under civil court, defamation of public character and emotional distress. Frank opened the document slowly in his office, scanning it with the same grim focus he once reserved for battlefield casualty reports. "She's suing you," he said, without blinking, "for exposing the very fraud she committed." Angela let out a short, humorless laugh. Bold. In the same way walking into traffic is bold. I didn't smile. I just sat still. Quiet was my weapon now. Sierra's filing accused me of malicious misrepresentation, citing orchestrated public attacks with intent to dismantle a reputable charitable organization. The irony didn't escape anyone. Frank placed the folder down. "We're not just going to dismiss this, we're going to dismantle it. Publicly, permanently." The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Beige walls, one flag, one bench. But the room swelled with tension. Sierra entered in tailored black chin-high makeup, heavier than usual. Her lawyer did all the talking. She never looked at me, not once. Frank rose on our behalf, calm, controlled. He submitted a series of exhibits. The forged power of attorney document. The veteran's only grant tied to my credentials. The grant application citing awards I'd earned, used without consent. Audio of Sierra calling my story hers. A video recently uncovered by Angela. That last one, less than 60 seconds long, showed Sierra rehearsing a monologue in front of a mirror. Her words were carefully chosen, laced with rehearsed emotion. "She always controlled me," she said. "People like her, they don't protect, they suppress." Then a man's voice off camera. "Should we make it sound more abusive?" Sierra nodded slowly. "Yeah, we'll go there if she doesn't back off." Angela had received that footage anonymously. We didn't need to guess who leaked it. Someone inside her camp had chosen a side. Frank turned to the judge. "Your Honor, we contend this lawsuit is not about protecting reputation, it's about silencing truth." The judge leaned back, tapping her pen against the wood. After a pause that felt like a held breath, she said, "There's no defamation in truth. Motion to dismiss is granted. No courtroom explosion, no gasps. Just silence." Sierra didn't flinch, but her eyes locked onto mine for the first time. I stood slowly, walked past her. No gloating, no smirk. Just the calm, steady breath of someone who'd waited for justice and refused to beg for it. As I passed her shoulder, I whispered, not for effect, not for the room, just for her. "Your empire wasn't built on lies. It was built on stolen blood. They dismissed me from the family long ago, but now I grant myself an honorable discharge from them." The house hadn't changed. Same shutters needing paint. Same brittle hedges that never quite survived the winter. I stood outside for a minute longer than necessary, hand on the doorknob, letting the weight settle before I crossed the threshold. Inside it was colder than I remembered. The heating worked, but the warmth wasn't there. Mom didn't get up when I walked in. She was sitting on the same green armchair she used to knit in now, just scrolling on her phone. I moved quietly, walking past framed pictures, Sierra at a podium. Sierra with award plaques, Sierra on magazine covers. The spaces where my photos used to be were still there. Just repurposed. She didn't say hello. "You didn't have to drag the whole family through the mud," she said without looking up. "You could have handled it privately." I didn't reply. Not yet. I went upstairs and packed what I came for 2 boxes. Old journals, deployment letters, a folded flag, and a carved wooden box Dad once gave me after my first promotion. The mirror in the hallway still had a crack one I remembered from a slammed door during Sierra's high school tantrum. Mom never fixed it. Back downstairs, I paused. Then I placed a handwritten letter on the side table. No envelope. Just paper weighted with clarity. This isn't abandonment. This is release. Blood should never be used to bind someone to silence or guilt or false loyalty. I gave you every chance to see me. You looked away. I walked out before she could read it. The sky outside had turned the color of iron, clouds heavy with unshed rain. I drove east toward the coast, toward something unspoken but certain. Angela had left me a voicemail earlier that morning. I hadn't answered. "They're publishing a follow-up feature," she said. "But it's not about Sierra anymore. It's about legacy, about how people recover their names. I thought you should know." I let it play again as I stood on the dunes, boots sinking into the cold sand. The ocean always leveled things, rank noise history. When I reached the water's edge, I took out the letter that had arrived the day before. Ethan's handwriting was crooked, unpolished, like he didn't quite believe he deserved paper this official. "We're calling it Valor Truth. A platform for veterans whose stories were erased or misused. Your name will be on the dedication plaque whether you like it or not." I smiled just enough for myself. Then, kneeling, I opened the old wooden box. Inside were 5 medals. Some I barely remembered receiving. Some still carried dust from overseas. But at the very bottom, tucked beneath the foam lining, was the first one I'd ever earned. A small bronze star. Given when I was 20, scared, and still naive enough to think honor was something others could give or take. I held it up to the dimming sky. No fanfare, no cameras, no stage. Just breath and wind and the final unhooking of shame. Time to wear it again. This time, for me. They once clapped for her lies. Now they stood silent for my truth. December 31st. The final day of the year. The beginning of something else. Veterans Hall had never looked like this before. Flags framed the stage not in decoration but in reverence. A brass plaque gleamed under warm lighting, its engraving still covered by a black velvet drape. Dozens of chairs lined the room, everyone filled. Reporters, veterans, young cadets in uniform, civilians with unsure eyes, and those who knew exactly why they came. Angela stood by the camera bank. She wasn't crying yet, but her shoulders held something quiet like she might. Frank was to my left, his suit-creased tie imperfect. Just enough to prove he hadn't worn one since court. The event began with a speech from the Department of Defense representative, a silver-haired man with eyes that had seen more battles than his medals admitted. This honor was delayed but never denied, he said, voice even but resonant. And today, we don't correct a mistake. We acknowledge a truth long overdue. I stepped onto the stage without cue. No musical swell. No fanfare. The podium was bare, save for the microphone. I didn't need paper. Just breath. I won't speak long, I said. A few heads tilted, waiting for more. I never asked for applause in uniform. And I won't start now. Truth doesn't need revenge. It just needs light. There were no gasps, no shouts. Just the kind of silence that grows when something real has been said. A collective breath held and never quite exhaled. Behind me, the velvet covering was removed. A bronze plate shimmered. Colleen Beckett, in honor of unyielding integrity, for service in truth at home and abroad. The applause began slowly, then grew, not louder but fuller. Every person stood. Some clapped with hands, some with tears, some simply stood, heads bowed in recognition. Angela's face broke, quiet streaks down her cheek. I reached across and squeezed her hand. Frank didn't say anything, but he nodded once, something more permanent than a sentence. Then came the final part. The DoD officer extended the box, black embossed with a single silver seal. Inside, a new medal. Not earned in battle. Not stained by sacrifice. Not taken by someone else. Mine. I accepted it. Then turned. A room full of people. Not family. Not followers. Witnesses. I stood straight, raised my right hand, and delivered the salute, not for approval, not for show. For every truth that survived silence. Colleen turned back to the crowd, raised her hand in a firm military salute. Silence answered. Complete. Irrevocable. Final. Justice may be late, but it never forgets. They once erased her from the family, replaced her name with a lie, and clapped for the performance. But truth has its own gravity, and when it lands, it doesn't ask for applause. Like a slow-burning fuse finally meeting flame, justice may come late, but when it arrives, it doesn't whisper. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. If you've ever been silenced, maybe today is the day you reclaim your voice. Like, share, and comment your thoughts below. Press 1 if you felt her pain, or 2 if you think the story could have gone further.